and then punished dozens of Japanese intelligence officers and soldiers for what was found to be a war crime, which was waterboarding. The reason it's done to American intelligence officers and to military personnel, the SEER training that the director referred to, is because it's an important part of our training. I went through it myself. We are at risk of being captured, kidnapped, and then tortured. And so the training is to teach us what it is like in a controlled environment, how bad it can be, and to learn ways that you can maintain some shred of your individuality and not go crazy. So it's training to protect us from the effects of torture. The sick transmogrification occurred after 9/11, when what was torture resistance training was turned into an interrogation to obtain intelligence, which is not what it does at all. It breaks people. It doesn't obtain intelligence. And that's clearly known by the military, by the intelligence community, and by our JAG Corps, the legal corps of the military and the United States government, up until after 9/11 with this strange twist.
This is what's hard for me to imagine. And Jim, you're the expert, I guess, and certainly you had the responsibility for so much of these decisions in your time as director of the CIA. But you know, if somebody's afraid of snakes, for example, I'm not a big fan of them. If somebody said to me, "You're going into a snake pit if you don't answer some simple questions right now, but where your unit was, what kind of how did the machine operate?" Most people would, a lot of people would crack under that. You say they wouldn't, or they would? You're just saying you shouldn't do that. You just, as a normative thing, we shouldn't be thinking about how to scare the hell out of somebody.
No, I'm not opposed to mind games. I think that's what a lot of interrogation is, and some of them are really very shocking and so forth. But I think if the question is, can you keep somebody from Al-Qaeda who knows about, like as Khalid Sheikh Mohammed did, who knows about forthcoming attacks, if you can find out enough that you can stop that, is it okay to scare people? I'd say sure, it's okay to scare people. Is it okay to pull out their fingernails? No.
Because it wouldn't work?
Well, working is not the only criterion. It's also...
But if it's 3,000 people, why wouldn't you pull out some fingernails?
I think there need to be some clear lines, and pulling out fingernails is clearly torture.
Why?
And we shouldn't do that.
If it works, see, this is my problem. If it does work, why would you have a line to stop at? Because if you could save 3,000 lives at the cost of one life even, wouldn't you go for the 3,000 to save them from jumping off a 100-floor building? That's what it came to.
I think there have to be some lines for all of us in this very difficult world of distinguishing between what we would do in order to protect the country on the one hand and what the ethical considerations are on the other. Where I draw it is at permanent physical damage and something like fingernail pulling out. I do not draw it at preventing people from scaring Khalid Sheikh Mohammed when he's being interrogated.
Right, I respect that. Let me ask you this. Do you think it does any advantage in terms of deterring the other side from doing it? We're up against some, you know, the customers are up against more than I do, the people like Al-Qaeda and Islamic State. Do you think they care what our limits are when they make their own determination what to do to people, when they behead them and make them sit there in front of a video camera in total humiliation?
What they'll do is use any evidence, including from Senate Democratic committee members, they'll use any evidence that comes out publicly as a rationalization for their doing what they're going to do anyway. They are not going to slow down in beheading people or raping women or crucifying families, which they do now, because we go one way rather than another. That's not what drives them. What drives them is they want a caliphate. They want to establish their empire and have it grow, and they'll do anything to make that happen.
Anyway, the Justice Department lawyer who wrote the torture memos, if you will, that authorized the interrogation methods, challenges any president in the same circumstances to not use the controversial interrogation methods. Let's listen to him.
I think that any president in that circumstance, given the information either as the CIA presented it or as Senator Feinstein thinks it should have been presented, an American president, I think, still would have ordered these interrogation methods.
Let me go back to Mr. Carle. As an expert, do you believe they work?
Well, of course they don't work. You know, and Mr. Yu and I went to the same university, and he was a Summa graduate, and I certainly was not. But I seem to have imbued the meaning of the American Constitution a little more clearly than he did. you don't define yourself by what your enemies do and try to do and how they will react to yourself. You affirm who you are, and you do what you need to protect yourself. Director Woolsey and I agree on most of these points, I think. The fact is, the premise of the question is, would you do it, seems to assume that it does work, but it does not work.
Well, why was it used in the field in
Vietnam
over and over again? You see ARVN people, South Vietnamese people, fighting as our allies with water hoses in people's mouths, suspected VC, probably VC people, to get some instant battlefield information, some intel for their G2s to use right then in battle, in firefight.
Yeah, which is probably wrong, and they spent a good part of the Vietnam War bombing their own towns as a result of it. Another critical component in intelligence work is you don't just get someone to talk. If he says something from whatever means you use, you then have to evaluate it. You don't simply take information and go off and act upon it. There's never been.
Why did they do it so much? Why was it done so much? It seems like it was done a lot.
You're talking about waterboarding, our practices?
No, we're just simple tortures in the field to get the information fast.
Through history.
Yeah, in the Vietnamese War.
Humans are less human than we like to imagine ourselves, and a lot of this comes down to an atavistic hostile action towards the enemy, towards the other. It's a chance to put your heel on his throat, and you do imagine that you can coerce something out of someone because you can force someone to bend down by using physical strength. But you have to, as an intelligence officer, evaluate the information you obtain.
I understand.
And there's no assumption, there's no certainty that the information obtained by breaking someone's arm is going to be more useful than by using traditional methods, which the FBI has used for decades very successfully.
Okay, thanks so much, Glenn Carle, for joining us. Jim Woolsey, thank you so much, Mr. Director, for joining us. This is a tough debate. It's a tough one. Coming up, President Obama says he's concerned there could be a backlash around the world to the release of the CIA torture report. Iran's supreme leader is now calling America, catch this, a symbol of tyranny against humanity. How's that for a joke? Anyway, this is Hardball, a place for politics.